Thank you for joining the Once Changing the World, which is India's first future tech meets sustainability podcast. And today, I'm delighted and honored to have with me Mischa Dohler, who's the chief architect at Ericsson. He's working on cutting-edge topics of 6G, Metaverse, XR, quantum technologies, and blockchain. He's a serial entrepreneur, composer, and a pianist. He's a top 1% cited innovator across all science fields globally. He's the co-founder and former CTO of the IoT pioneering company World Sensing, co-founder and former CTO of the AI-driven satellite company Serious Insight AI, and co-founder of the sustainability company Moving Beans. So, Mischa, really appreciate you taking time and being part of a humble podcast. You've got your hands everywhere, so I'm super excited to have you on the podcast and talk to you about the various frontier tech spaces which you are involved in. The biggest I think technology was the communication, the social media, and or leveraging it was 2G, 3G, 4G, which we are in right now, and then we are getting into 5G. There are already people who are working on 6G. So there is some crazy things happening in the space of technology. So could you kind of explain your background? What is 5G? And I think that the most important part is when we talk about 5G, we cannot talk about just the pros. There's also the cons. Because there's lots of people saying the radiation, stuff like that. So maybe address all of that.
Oh, wow. This is going to be a long response, Eddie. If I have to give my background, the pros of 5G and the cons of 5G. You know what? Let's focus maybe on 5G. I mean, look, you use your smartphone, right? You use, popular apps. Let's go with Instagram as an example, and it turns out that actually to make that all happen, you need three things always, right? Always pay attention. You always need three things. You need the app, the one you experience, but you also need devices and you need networks. Okay, without any of these three, nothing will happen, right? You can't use your Instagram if you don't have the device. You can't really load it. If you don't have the network, it can't connect. So therefore, we always need to develop these three things together. We have done the same thing in 4G, and we will be doing the same thing in 6G. Now, in the 5G era is quite interesting because we have, kind of done a real revolution in telecoms as we moved from 4G to 5G. Now, in the 4G era, we were building boxes and cables, and we were delivering bespoke solutions. So think of it like somebody building a bespoke car for you, right? And it's if you want to change something because something broke, you need to go back to the factory and you need to ask for new spare part, and it takes a long time and it's very expensive. In 5G, we have softwareized the system. So we are running essentially on commodity hardware. We are running on normal servers, which you can easily buy, and then you load the 5G software on it. And it had loads of advantages in doing this. So first of all, of course, we were able to push data rates by a factor of 10 compared to what we had in 4G, okay? We were able to shorten latencies by a factor of 10, and that's hugely important. I'll come to this in a moment. But we were also able to shorten essentially and lower the shorten time to market and lower the total cost of ownership because everything now is in software. So, that's a huge advantage. And going forward now in 6G, we'll continue with that paradigm. And in fact, it's the same paradigm as the computing industry has gone through. 50 years ago, IBM had, these computers where everything was in one big box. And then over the decades, we invented, the operating system, and it has kind of separated the software which runs on top from the hardware which is below. So today you can use Microsoft Office on the Mac because the operating system takes care of this. So in the telco era, we've gone exactly through the same thing, so that's really remarkable. But the one feature I want to really highlight in 5G, apart from the high data rate, is really the low latency. And low latency is super important. You don't appreciate that because, in fact, we as human beings for millions of years have been geared towards low latency engagement. And when we are together in a room, we see each other, the light signal goes into my eyes, goes in through the nerve into my cortex here, and I'm processing that signal. And as long as it comes within 10 milliseconds, I have that feeling of immediacy. I have that feeling that you're with me. We're building up emotions which normally you wouldn't get. So the likes of Zoom, Teams, FaceTime, whatever you use, the latency is much longer And you don't have that feeling of immediacy. So therefore, in 5G, for the very first time, we're able to shorten that to a level that, hey, we can now use a digital media and get almost the same level of emotion as we have when we meet in person. And I demonstrated that in 2018. We did the world's first 5G concert where I was in Berlin playing the piano under the Brandenburger Tor, and my older daughter Noah was in London in the Guildhall, and we were connected over. We didn't make it 10 milliseconds. We were at 20 milliseconds, but we were extremely low latency. She was beamed in like a holographic connection, and it was so emotional because she was literally with me. Okay, I never experienced that before. And whilst I was playing, I really struggled not to cry because it was so powerful that we were thousands of kilometers apart, and yet it felt like she was with me next door. You can watch it on YouTube, on my YouTube channel. It's there. You can watch it. But anyway, so these are the advantages of 5G. Does it make sense, or you want to throw in another question on the pros of 5G?
Yes, I mean, you mentioned about the first 5G concert in 2018 with your daughter as a holographic image, but from 2018 till 2022, I think, there's some crazy acceleration happened in technology, in holographic technology, in artificial intelligence, in augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality, IoT, and sometimes the speed at which these technologies are moving, it's kind of disrupting the status quo of things. So far we had everything which was hierarchical, top bottom, with the way companies used to function. Innovation used to happen, but I think everything is changing. There are these startups, the individual researchers who are doing some crazy things. It's no longer just innovations happening in the big companies. So I want to unpack all of those, and maybe what will happen to the devices. Will it be what the devices that we carry, your mobile phones, will it eventually become wearable technology? I want to get into that, but I think there are a lot of people who are scared about 5G. So maybe if you could very briefly address that.
Yeah. So I mean, there's clearly the that perception that 5G is a kind of a dangerous technology. And interestingly, we had it in the 3G times and also in the 4G times. So it's not the first time that people say, "Oh, radiation is going to kill us," and it's very bad what we're doing. But this time in the 5G era, of course, we have really social media at global scale. So, and now imagine, us engineers explaining why it is safe, which is always going to be a fairly boring video, because there's nothing exciting to talk about. And I'll come to this in a moment. And then there's a clickbait video, which tells essentially exactly how people are going to die and how bad that is. What people will be clicking on, okay? And this is what these people really are banking on, right? So there's a lot of this clickbait, viral stuff happening, and it has been actually really bad, I have to say, to the point that we've been discussing in the ecosystem to make sure that we have a proper outreach in the 6G era, because people have the right to be worried. Okay, I always say people have the right to be worried, but they also should then listen to what the engineers have to say. I trust, for instance, doctors who do the research. I'm not a doctor. I don't take an opinion on COVID as an example. They are the doctors. They have had, decades of a career going through. Why should I be a specialist in this, right? So I'm a specialist in 5G in the wireless ecosystem. So I would expect people to respect, the engineering output. So let me tell you what we do. Before we use any of the frequencies, they're being tested very rigorously for decades. Okay, there is an institution which runs with a fairly boring acronym of ERCNIP, which stands for something related to ionizing radiation. What they're doing is they're taking a certain frequency band, let's say the new 5G frequency band. They take that, and then they would measure that, in terms of exposure on the human skin, how much heating does it cause, is there any danger for cancer, and they're ramping up the power levels. Okay, they're ramping up the power levels until it reaches, these kind of dangerous levels. Then they divide these power levels by a factor of 1 million. And that is the maximum transmission power the operators are allowed to use, the maximum, okay? So it is very, very, very far from any of the dangerous radiation levels. It has nothing to do with anything dangerous. So This is number one. We're doing very, very serious exercises there. The second thing you need to understand is the power levels for which we are using, or the frequencies, it's very important which frequencies you use, because what can only be dangerous to humans are two frequencies. One is the ionizing band, so what comes from outer space, so it's very high frequencies. There's no human communication system, or it's beyond light. It's ionizing, is a very, very bad radiation, but we got the ozone layer taking care of that. So this one is clearly not a factor in any of the telco systems. And then you got the bands which are around the resonance frequency of water. Okay, remember we are like 70% made out of water. So therefore, any frequency which resonates with water is the one we need to watch out for. Interestingly, this is where the microwave oven works, because the microwave oven doesn't heat the substances, the meat or the vegetables, it heats the water in the substances, and then it actually expands. So therefore, the only frequency which could cause some harm is around the microwave frequency area. Okay, and guess which system uses microwave frequency bands? It's Wi-Fi. Okay, so if there is a system which could potentially cause harm to humans, it's Wi-Fi. And we had Wi-Fi in the 2.4 gigahertz region now for what, 20, 30 years? I don't think anybody in the medical sector has come back saying, we had even a single person who developed whatever disease because of Wi-Fi. Do you see my point? So there's no evidence to suggest that really the radiation is a problem, right? So, and the other thing people were claiming, 5G causes COVID. I mean, this is complete bunkers, because, you need to understand there's a difference between correlation and causality, right? So let's look at correlation. Correlation is if, there is an area, let's say with me here in Silicon Valley, where there is 5G and people die of COVID, right? And then you correlate this and say these two are related. Causality is if you say 5G is what causes the deaths, all right? And then we look at countries like, loads of countries in Africa, or even let's look at your native India, okay? So at the COVID time, there was no 5G. You didn't have 5G, all right? And you had people who were dying of COVID. So clearly, there was no causality there. All right. So you must understand, use your scientific brain always. And if you're in doubt, search for that. That's my recommendation. Don't go for the clickbaits. Any video which has assembled more than 1 million views, you can almost be certain that this was made for viral effects. Okay. Go to the pages of the people who do fact checks. People like me, I've been called in a lot for fact checks. I'm a lot on TV for that, for exactly that topic. We promise you, we're making everything possible to keep this safe and yet help you to connect to your family, to connect to your children, to connect to your parents, to really live that power of an untethered, 4G, 5G, 6G future, so you're safe.
Thank you, Mischa, for really explaining it so nicely and breaking it down that you guys have been testing it for decades, and it is safe at this point in time. And yes, I think we live in a world of content overload, and I think there is so much content and these deep fakes. It's very difficult to kind of understand what to kind of believe it and what not. But coming from someone who's an engineer, I guess this should be great enough for people who really believe in science and innovation and facts rather than fiction, which is created by some of the content creators who really want to go for clickbait. Coming back to connectivity, obviously, the communication is revolutionized the world. And I've seen this up close and personal, because being in India, maybe just around 15 years back, we were just about a country doing okay, but then Geo came in out of nowhere. And it completely transformed the way we learn things and know about things, because Geo started giving us internet dirt cheap and gave us mobiles like really, really cheap. What that did was democratized education, accessibility of content. So I and I think 1.3 billion people would say that communication connectivity is that tool which has made India such a powerful nation in a very very short point of time. And today I think if you have internet connectivity and a desire and intent, you could be sitting at any point, any place in the map of the world, but you've got internet and connectivity, you could create your preferred future. Now 5G, we are still, we still don't have it, because the spectrums are not being issued over here in India. But I think in the next couple of maybe this year or next year, the spectrums are going to be distributed. Would you like to talk a little bit more about 5G? Once 5G happens, how our world is going to get transformed, how our interfaces is going to change, what happens to the mobile? Will it go from carrying technology to wearing technology? And also talk about we have not yet like opened up or made 5G accessible to everyone, but there are companies such as yourself, Nokia, working on 6G. Maybe talk about 5G, 6G, the positives of the world, and how the world is completely going to change with 5G and 6G.
Yeah. It's a really, really good point you're raising, because we're always in this continuous flux of, generations. And actually, let's zoom out. And I think, your listeners would appreciate that, just to understand how I personally also look at how the generations evolved, And you understand very quickly, whenever we have an odd generation, like 1G, 3G, 5G, we are introducing a really revolutionary concept. Okay, and then with the even generation, 2G, 4G, and 6G, we consolidate that and we really make this a consumer proposition which works for everybody. Like in 1G, we introduced untethered voice. Before, everybody was talking at home with a wired telephone, and suddenly somebody had an idea, hey, let's make this untethered, with a wireless headphone. But of course, it was a proprietary system, mainly for businesses, interestingly, okay? And in 2G, we made this a proposition for planet Earth. Everybody on the planet could use that. Very powerful. In 3G, we had the idea of bringing the internet to the mobile. Okay, it's a revolution. Before, you were on your desktop computers, even laptops at this point wasn't a big thing. You were like, you were on your desk to get to the internet, and suddenly somebody said, let's do this. And it was actually BlackBerry, and again, a business proposition which drove this very much. The business people at BlackBerry were in the airports and really using that internet on the run. And then in 4G, Steve Jobs came along with the iPhone and made this again a proposition for planet Earth. Everybody could use it, So in 5G, we have geared now these networks to start with the new revolution. And this, let's call this the 3D web revolution. For me, sitting in Silicon Valley, I can tell you it feels really like 1998 when we just started with, the internet, these very early days. And we are now in the very early days of building this three-dimensional internet, right? So content will be perceived in 3D, applications will be written in an immersive way. We will have devices, in a very heterogeneous set of devices. Some will be AR, so glasses which see through and project something on there. Some will be virtual reality. You will have seen the Oculus Meta stuff where you work in an office. And I tried their Office app. You can download it if you have an Oculus. You can try this. It's really good, actually. I didn't expect this. I could imagine myself working for a few hours in there. So this is coming along. We will still be using our mobile phones. So interestingly, you will still be able to take your mobile phone and maybe, look around with a phone. It will give you three-dimensional content, a bit like, think of Pokemon Go, but for something which isn't necessarily a fun game. And then, we have very advanced things like contact lenses, okay? So Mojo Vision is a really interesting company in Silicon Valley working on that. So we are starting to get into this era where the devices play along, 5G is playing along, and the applications will come. So we have that triangle. Remember, I told you about this important triangle. And we will have the first ecosystem emerging. These will be our first baby step as a human civilization into this very new era. And, and then we always need about a generation, a human generation, interestingly, to get these technologies actually adopted. And I was at King's College in London for many years, and we had a whole department there dealing with human adoption of new technologies. And they found out no matter how quickly the supply side iterates. So you were mentioning at the beginning, there's so many startups, things are happening quicker and quicker. Very true. Okay, it's very true. There's so much innovation going on. There's a lot of capital to scale that innovation. So we accelerated, but actually the uptake, the demand side, always still works in human generations. We need our kids to grow into this new era. So therefore, they're the ones who are slowing it down a little bit, and that's a good thing, okay? Because I think evolution taught us that when you get out of the cave, you need to be very careful. You need to do this slowly and learn what's out there, right? So we're essentially learning now our first baby steps, and with 5G plus, 5G advanced, we call that, and 6G, we will then democratize that technologies for the whole planet again, okay? And this is really where this fully immersive spatial internet will take off, where you can have your augmented reality glasses, you walk in the street, you get a lot of extra information, you can gamify things, you have volumetric and holographic communications with your friends and family. A lot of AI will help you to render the graphics very nicely. Unreal Engine 5 just came out recently with a completely new rendering technology. So there are loads of different fields suddenly coming together at this part of the 21st century, and I think it will be a real game changer for the next decades to come.
Right, there is so much exciting things happening, and what I see is that it's finally binding. It's all coming through, and I think it's just a matter of possibly maybe a couple of years when there's going to be like real world benefits, and maybe instead of like maybe taking like possibly years to kind of you mature enough where it becomes accessible to everyone, possibly it's gonna be distributed and to everyone very, very quick, because there's some crazy things happening. But yes, I mean, like for example, my boy, he's 7 years old, and he's on his Oculus headset, and back when I was young, when you watch TV, I had to get up, because the buttons were on the TV. You had to change the channels on the TV, and then we went on to remotes. But my son talks to Alexa. I mean, for whatever he wants, he's communicating with technology. So we creating this human machine engagement, and I hope that human machine engagement is beneficial, because there's so much cool things happening. Because with the AR VR things, everything is going to be upended. We don't know how business is going to function, how education or healthcare is going to function, because earlier we used to go to healthcare, we used to go to our education institute. With virtual reality, metaverse, it will come to us. I mean, we won't need to go to a school. The school will come to us. We won't need to go to a healthcare. The healthcare will be able to come to us. And to make this, for to people to understand, it's very difficult. But yes, I guess we sitting in exciting space. And you are vested in IoT. Now, besides us, the software eating the world, softwareizing everything. Now we are digitizing even the physical world. I mean, we digitizing everything. So someone who's been vested in IoT, could you explain this digitization of everything, and what would it mean for businesses as well as consumers?
Yeah, IoT is a super interesting field, and in fact, it's not a single technology or single solution. It is a set of very heterogeneous solutions, heterogeneous technologies, and even very heterogeneous business models, right? So, that's why when you see the projections of IoT, from a market cap point of view, it's always very large. We're talking about trillions of dollars, until the year 2030. But actually, when you zoom in, the individual opportunities are very kind of specific to, let's say, a specific city, when you want to do smart city with IoT, etc. So we need to understand it, but it's an exciting technology. And 5G is a great enabler for the IoT ecosystem, and Ericsson actually has taken a world leadership here in providing a platform, a global platform, which is able to connect your Internet of Things devices, right? So the name says it's an Internet of Things, not an Internet for humans, right? So essentially, initially we started talking about sensors. So you would have sensors around you. Imagine the room I'm sitting in. It would measure the temperature, it would measure the humidity, it would measure the air quality. It would also measure the light, and it would measure actually, maybe even the color composition of this room, right? So I'm giving you loads of different things you could measure. And then this would essentially connect these measurements, these sensors, very small sensors, we're talking about very miniature things right now, would connect using a 4G, 5G, in the future 6G radio, and go to a platform, and our Ericsson product, for instance, called IoT, the Internet of Things Accelerator. In there, you do the data processing. You would actually try to figure out, hey, what can I do with this data? You run some big data analytics, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and this now generates insights, right? So certain insights, and here it becomes really interesting. So an insight might be, okay, so this room is now too hot. When Mischa's in here, he likes it, at 20 degrees and not at 25. And actually in America, I have the opposite problem. I feel there's too much air conditioning. So let's go with the opposite. The room is too cold. Mischa comes in, so let's switch off the air conditioning. Okay, so now suddenly you're not only sensing, you are actuating, you're instructing an actuator to close a valve to switch a switch. Okay, the same with the light. So maybe there's an autistic person who doesn't like to have so much light. Then we would dim down the light, and again, you need an actuator to do that. So we can do loads of things. And Ericsson laid out a really exciting vision, our Ericsson research folks, for the future. They call that cyber-physical continuum, where we could even think of mechanical things to be reconfigured. As an example, I may not like this table here. I don't like how the chairs are right now here in this room. There might be small MEMS robotic devices in there, and they would reconfigure the chair, the table. They would move the furniture, right? So suddenly, we will have an environment in a few years to come where, depending who's here, the context, what you want to do, can reconfigure in real time. So we're getting this continuous loop of sensing, processing, and acting, right? So very complicated. There are loads of implications from privacy, from ethics point of view, from even from a control stability point of view. But we're looking at this, right? So we're making sure we're baking all these mechanisms early on into the technology, so we don't have surprises later. But that's a future we will see, Eddie. And it's quite an exciting future. And 5G Advanced, and 6G will really enable that.
Right. So 5G obviously is gonna, drive all of this IoT, AR,
Yeah.
VR, this metaverse and Web3. I think it's at the hype cycle at this point in time. With Facebook rebranding as a metaverse first company. Would you like to explain what the metaverse is? And while you are at it, maybe you could also address the converging technology with metaverse, Web3, because Web3 is that tech which the technology of trust, blockchain, decentralized finance, digital, decentralized autonomous organization. There are so much things which is crammed into it, and as someone who's an enterprise, some of the largest enterprise in the world, how you guys prepared to the blockchain and the Web3 world?
No, it's a super hype topic at the moment. I sit here in Silicon Valley, and as you can imagine, everybody talks about the metaverse, and we are also collaborating. We're doing the lab I'm in is called D15. We're doing a lot of really exciting use cases along the metaverse enabling, and they're on our website. You can look it up. So it's really an exciting era. And when the term metaverse was actually coined by Neil Stephenson, right? So in his novel Snow Crash, I met him the other day in Stanford. So really interesting person, and he essentially imagine this world which actually we are building now. You should read it, Eddie, and then everybody is listening in. It is surprisingly accurate, 30 years on. And so the technology now, so what does it really enable? What will the metaverse be? So we look at it in three things. So the metaverse most foremost is really a social construct. Okay, and that's very important. This is not about anybody putting on a VR headset and playing a game, okay, alone or against a computer, etc. This is really a social construct, because think of it, if we really want this to succeed, we need this social stickiness, right? The same as WhatsApp became socially sticky, all the other, kind of social media became socially sticky. If we want the metaverse to work, it has to be a social construct. So, and I see that, for instance, with my younger daughter. She's playing Minecraft, and Minecraft, in fact, is a metaverse. It's a three-dimensional thing. They're doing things together there with her friends. She comes home from school. They would spend time there. So she grows up already in this three-dimensional ecosystem, immersive ecosystem, and they're chatting at the same time. So this is really a social construct. She's spending time there with her friends, right? And she doesn't need AR, VR goggles. She doesn't need Web3, right? So the metaverse, Minecraft isn't built on a Web3 construct. So therefore, you see that for this to succeed, foremost, it has to be really a social construct. The second thing, apologies. The second thing, we really need to make sure to look at this triangle of devices, networks, and applications. Okay, really make sure that whoever uses that metaverse in the future has the right devices, whether they are sitting on a computer, whether they're using a laptop, a mobile phone, VR devices, AR devices, or contact lenses. It doesn't really matter. It needs to be properly connected to the digital fabric. Okay, and of course, a computer should work on fiber, Wi-Fi and fiber, presumably. As you go more untethered, AR and contact lenses, you would move into the space of 5G connectivity. So, we really need solid networks there. But then the applications need to be there as well. It doesn't make sense to have, great devices and great networks if you have something which nobody uses. So therefore, these three things need to be done. And again, I'm not talking about Web 3.0 here. Okay, so the whole Web 3.0 construct comes actually as a third thing. And I call them accelerator technologies. The metaverse can perfectly live without Web 3.0. It can perfectly live without AI. It can perfectly live without any other type of accelerating technology you can think of. But we think it's an important accelerator because it will drive the creator economy. And you need the creator economy to have good applications as one of the constituents to make that work, okay? And Web 3.0, the beauty of it, people haven't spent too much time on this, but if you really zoom into a Web 3.0 stack, as we call that, you have something very new emerging, very different to our traditional software stack. So you have a blockchain layer, okay, which is essentially, could be Ethereum or EOS or Solana, you name it, right? So they're a blockchain layer. Then you do have a value layer, okay? You have your tokens, okay? You do have your wallets, you do have your exchanges, you do have your NFT marketplaces, okay? They're built straight on that blockchain. They're not built on the applications, they are built on the blockchain. And only on top of that do we build the applications, okay? So if you look at a metaverse like Ifland, which is built on a Web 3.0 construct, it is using the tokens, which are built on the blockchain. Why do I mention that specific order of events is? I'm mentioning that because if an application is successful, let's say, Sandbox or Ifland are successful, people start using it, then automatically, because it's built on the value layer, it will create value. You don't have to worry about this. The tokens will get value over time. You can bring them to an exchange and exchange them for other digital currencies, or you can actually exchange them for what we call the fiat currencies, the real world currencies, right? Contrast that with, let's say, Minecraft, okay? So we build the software and then we try to figure out how do we actually monetize on that, Okay, so the monetization in our normal world comes after, not natively built in. So this is something really smart, and I think this will really drive a lot of the Web 3.0 construct. And again, we're in the early days. There's a lot of hype. It will now collapse again. There's the Gardner curve, the hype cycle. It will it's now in the decline phase a little bit, but it will slowly go up and really build to a solidified proposition over the next years to come.
Airtel has partnered with Ericsson recently. So, how does Ericsson view India as a market opportunity? And could you kind of give some examples on, when we actually have 5G deployed here in India, what would be the social and economical benefits that, according to you, here in India? The rollout
Yeah,
of 5G.
that's a great question. So, we Ericsson loves India. We consider that as a really, really important market. And we think, we want to empower you as a country to get connected, democratize education, democratize also your amazing application developer community, right? So you have a great skill sets in AI and software and everything, right? And that is really what we want you to empower for. So that's what we really want to do. Doing radio is very hard. We have been doing this for decades, and it's really, really hard. We are doing this for you, so you don't need to do that, okay? And therefore, the radio stuff, leave that to us. And Airtel has actually recognized that. They have chosen us as their supplier. We're currently 5G world global leader. So not surprisingly, our gear will end up in India. Once that is set up, you can concentrate where the real value is. The real value to India is the over-the-top economy, where education, all the software development, healthcare, you name it. And that's really what we want to bring to India. And then once it's up and running, the economic impact will be gigantic. And in fact, you can work it out, you can calculate it yourself. There is a CTIA report, which has been done in America, for America, the economic impact of 5G. Now, America is not India. So to get the numbers for India, you need to do two things. You need to normalize it by the GDP, and you need to normalize it by the mid-band spectrum. So depending on how much spectrum you have for 5G and actually 4G as well, these two spectrum bands, you compare that to how much is in the US, you normalize it, you then normalize it with the GDP, and you get your 5G value. And it's gigantic, I can tell you. The economic acceleration due to 4G and now 5G in the United States is staggering. They figured out, CTA figured out that, delaying the rollout of 5G by a month is billions of dollars of lost economic impact. So therefore, deploy it as quickly as possible. It is great that Airtel is taking that leadership. Let's get it out. Let's empower you as a nation to do what you guys do best.
Thank you, Mischa. I really appreciate this, you taking time and being part of the podcast. And I really hope that it gets deployed over here soon, because I think, once we have 5G, how we communicate and do business is going to get completely upended. My last question to you, because Ericsson, your vision is limitless connectivity and unlimited possibilities. Paint a picture. I mean, what the world is going to look like, when we have 5G, 6G.
Yeah, we want a social construct. We don't want to build it for kind of a matrix situation or inception situation where people just lay with their headphones somewhere in the living room and live in some virtual worlds. We really want this social construct. We want you to go out. We want you to mingle, to build that social fabric with your peers, be with your family. And if you can't be physically with them, then digitally, have the ability to use augmented reality capabilities of the future, get upskilled, get reskilled. We really believe in that reskilling, the power of reskilling. That's going to be the future. We want to be the base. We want to be that platform for you and for human civilization. That's really what we're doing. And we're working 24/7 to make sure the technology is working well. It is really secure. We do work a lot on security to make sure it's the securest technology on earth. And it is really, ethical and privacy enabled.
Thank you, Mischa. Really appreciate you taking time and being part of the podcast. I hope that your partnership with Airtel really flourishes, and the 5G rolls out over here soon in India, because we need that. Because I think once we have the 5G rolled out, each the democratization of healthcare, education will happen, and which is so needed here in India. So thank you once again for taking time and being part of the podcast. And to my listeners, if you like what you see in here, then please press the subscribe button. Until next time, see you guys. Bye bye. Thank you, Mischa. Really appreciate this.
Thank you, Eddie. It's a pleasure being with you on the podcast. You take good care. Thank you. Goodbye.